I just wanted to give a little sense in this particular contribution of someone who's been a Mumia supporter for a long time, since the late 80s, really, but in the movement officially in the early 90s. And I wanted to give a sense of how I met Mumia, how I first met Mumia, and also my family's involvement with Mumia. There are several other people, there are numerous other people in the Mumia movement who've had, their parents involved, or they were the children, families, and I think that family involvement is an important story to tell. So I want to tell a little bit about how I first met Mumia and then how that developed with the others in my family. I'm talking specifically about my daughter and my granddaughter. So, first, a little story. When I first came, I had been in the movement for quite a while by that time, but when I first came to visit Mumia was in 2000, in the year 2000. And he was still on death row. And I met him in this cubicle, basically, which had this plexiglass between us. And people have seen what that looks like. And at one point we were told we completely were intensely involved in conversation very quickly. But at one point Mumia stood up. And I'm small in size. I'm about 5 feet. And he got up, and he's like 6'3", and he was towering to me. He said, "Look," and I said, "Oh my God, you're so tall. I didn't realize you were so tall." Of course, it was comparative to me, and his response was so striking. I'll never forget it. He immediately sat down and said, "Oh, I'm sorry," as though he didn't want to overwhelm me, with his height. And I thought, wow, here's this brother on death row, barely allowed to move very much, and he's apologizing to me for standing up. And it said a lot about Mumia. I thought about how considerate he is of other people, how much he thinks of others, even when, he's a host. When you come, he has hundreds and hundreds of visitors over the years, and when you come there, he greets you as though you're coming to his house. And he's very hospitable, and he creates that atmosphere of being very hospitable. So that was my first impression of me, on top of nonstop. He was very interested in, I'm a psychologist by profession, and he was very interested in psychology, in some ways more interested than I am in the field, and asked a lot of questions, made a lot of comments, shared the books he had read, and so on and so on. So that was my first visit. It was very memorable. It was very dramatic. We, as many people do when they meet him, you bond very quickly, and so on. And so, have you ever visited him? Had the same experience, so I thought maybe you had. So that was about that same year. That was the year 2000. My daughter graduated from high school. And she went to a Quaker school in Brooklyn and graduated, and decided she wanted Mumia to address her high school graduating class. And so Mumia sent a recording that became very controversial, because unlike what I expected, which I expected he would just write something, thanking the Quakers or something, he instead criticized the Quakers for having played a role in slavery much later than other groups had. When it was, already time, people were beginning to withdraw in some way from the institution of slavery, and they still held on to it. So the school, big controversy, and the school thought, began thinking maybe they shouldn't have the message played, but the students insisted, and finally the great compromises of institutionals in America. I always laugh at the kinds of compromises. The message played, and there was a huge ovation after the message. And then one of the students, not my daughter introduced the message, but one of the students gave a speech that the history professor had basically written for him, saying history is very complicated and there are different interpretations of it, and that kind of bullshit. So, but it was a wonderful victory to have Mumia played at the Quaker thing with a criticism of the liberal facade of the Quakers. Mm-hmm. So that's our family involvement. It started in 2000. My granddaughter, in the year 2007, came to visit Mumia with me and Pam Africa. She was 5 years old, and she had never been to a prison, of course, and she was very quiet at first. She looked around at everything as we walked into the prison, as we met, and Mumia was still on death row. As we went, she looked at the ceiling, the windows, everything. But she was quiet, and she's usually a chatterbox. So finally Pam asked her, listen, we came here for you to meet Mumia. Is there anything you want to say to him? Well, without hesitation, she said, yes. I have a plan for how to get you out of prison. And if you can wait till Easter vacation, I will come with my class, and we will all break you out. So, we tried not to laugh, of course, and were very moved and very touched by this. And Mumia said, from your lips to God's ears. And she then proceeded, I can't remember if we asked her or what, but she proceeded to lay out the plan. And, you can't take anything into prison except, in that case, quarters. We were able to take quarters for the machines, for the junk machines. So I think we asked her how she was going to do it, and she took the quarters and laid them out in a triangular military position. It was like a military plan. And, she's this skinny little thing, 5 years old, and she says, well, this one, Miguel is going to be here, and this one's going to be here. She listed all the people and where their positions were, but the tip of the triangle was at the front, and she didn't put anybody there. And I think Pam said something, well, who's going to be? She looked at Pam like, what a stupid question. Of course, me. I'm going to be there. Mm-hmm. And we left it like that. And she was really, Pam discussed how kids often react like that, kind of, you grown-ups keep talking about, that these kids come to our meetings time and again, and yet Mumia still is not out. So she was taking things into her own hands. And I thought that story was always so touching to me. And even, of course, now that my granddaughter is much bigger, much older, and wouldn't come up with a thing like that. Unfortunately, kids' fantasies and dreams can't always be turned into reality. But that's a little bit. Of course, I've been visited Mumia many times since, and have continued to be in the movement. But that was a high point of my visits to him. Those two visits, that first visit when I met him, and he came across as such a beautiful human being. And then later on, quite a few years later, when we came back with my granddaughter and Pam. So that's the story I wanted to share for this day of celebration. Of course, I say with tremendous love and friendship and commitment and passion, happy birthday, Mumia. Happy birthday. And may you be with us in Saint Denis. Saint Denis is saving a place for you to come to Saint Denis when you're out of prison. And over again they've said, and I've heard that, did you have the fantasy of going to Saint Denis too? And visiting that street that they fought for so hard, that was dedicated to you. So someday, hopefully in the next year, maybe before the next, the anniversary of that street naming is the last day of, actually we're getting close to it, not this year, but the next year. It was right before May Day, so you'll be able to come back.